A genius looks eastward. History is filled with stories buried deep within the folds of time. Yet there are certain moments that do more than mark their own era. They echo through the centuries to come. In 1798, as Europe was reshaping itself in the aftermath of the French Revolution, a young general named Napoleon Bonaparte turned his gaze far beyond the European continent. His vision was not merely fixed on new territories drawn on maps, but on the heart of history, civilization, and the unknown. That vision would carry him to Egypt, the legendary land of the East. Napoleon was not just a soldier, he was a strategist, an intellectual, and a visionary. Though only 29 years old, he had already drawn the attention of Europe with his military triumphs in Italy. But mere victories on the battlefield were not enough for him. He sought a greater purpose, a legacy that would endure. With a mind as sharp as his sword, he understood that wars were not won by weapons alone, but also through ideas and culture. At the time, France was struggling with internal unrest and economic hardship in the wake of the revolution. Meanwhile, its rivalry with Britain was escalating. The British presence in India and their control over vital trade routes had caught Napoleon's attention. Rather than confronting Britain head-on, he aimed to sever those lifelines and undermine their influence in the East. Egypt was the key to this strategy. To seize Egypt would be to strike a blow at Britain and simultaneously open the door to Napoleon's dream of forging a new empire that would inscribe his name into the golden pages of history. But Napoleon's interest in Egypt was not solely strategic. The wisdom of the ancient world, the mysteries lurking in the shadows of the pyramids, the civilizations shaped along the banks of the Nile, all of this sparked his imagination. The East was not like the West. It was more mysterious, more ancient, and perhaps more profound. Napoleon was determined to uncover its meaning. The campaign he envisioned would not be a mere invasion. Armies would march, yes, but alongside them would travel scientists, engineers, historians, and artists. This would be more than conquest. It would be a journey of civilization. In the summer of 1798, when the French fleet set sail across the Mediterranean, history itself began to shift course. That fleet carried not only cannons and muskets, but also an idea, a dream, and a quest. As Napoleon scanned the horizon toward the east, he was preparing not just to conquer land, but to touch the very heart of time, guided by a genius whose sight reached far beyond his own age. This was more than the beginning of a military campaign. It was a turning point where the West met the East, where scientific curiosity marched alongside military power, where the past brushed against the future. Napoleon's gaze toward the East was not merely the ambition of a ruler, it was the longing of a man for the unknown. And that longing would transform the Egyptian expedition into something far greater than a military movement. It would become a civilizational voyage etched into the story of humankind. Target Egypt, blocking the road to England. By the end of the 1790s, Europe was shaken by wars and political turmoil. The waves triggered by the French Revolution had spread far beyond France, affecting the entire continent. The newly formed French Republic was battling monarchist forces within and counter-revolutionary powers outside. In this chaotic environment, one of France's most formidable rivals was, without a doubt, England. And at precisely this moment, Napoleon Bonaparte began devising strategies not only on the battlefield, but also across maps. His sights were set on a place where he could strike at the very heart of Britain, Egypt. Egypt's strategic position. Egypt held enormous geopolitical importance, serving as a land bridge between the Mediterranean and the Red Sea, and thereby the Indian Ocean. It was a vital corridor between Asia and Europe. This made it especially crucial for maintaining Britain's colonial dominance over India. The trade routes leading to India were the backbone of British economic power and imperial expansion. If those roots could be severed, Britain could be weakened. Napoleon's calculation was brutally clear. The heart of England is not in London, but in India. An indirect strike instead of direct war. Though one of the greatest military leaders of his era, Napoleon understood that victory could not be achieved by direct confrontation alone. Defeating Britain at sea was virtually impossible. The British Navy was the most powerful fleet in Europe. But if Napoleon could cross the Mediterranean and seize Egypt, he could sever Britain's vital connection with India, forcing their empire to its knees, both economically and politically. This would not be a conventional battle. It would be a far more effective kind of warfare, cutting trade arteries and collapsing the enemy from within. This plan was not merely a quest for military glory. It was a masterstroke that could destabilize global power balances. Napoleon sought to open a French gate on the southern shores of the Mediterranean. Egypt was not just a target, it was a springboard. From there, he envisioned marching towards Syria, then through the Persian Gulf to India. If France established itself in Egypt, it could undermine Britain's control of the Mediterranean, infiltrate Ottoman territories, or perhaps even establish a new French empire in the east. Egypt under Ottoman rule. Another important detail, Egypt was still officially under the sovereignty of the Ottoman Empire. However, due to a weakened central authority and increasingly independent provincial rulers, Ottoman control in Egypt was largely nominal. The real power belonged to the Mamluks, who ruled the region de facto. Napoleon saw this as an opportunity. It allowed him to minimize the risk of direct conflict with the Ottomans while presenting his campaign as one of bringing civilization. According to some sources, secret diplomatic negotiations were even attempted before the campaign, using veiled justifications like restoring order in Egypt. Yet once the French army set foot on Egyptian soil, diplomacy lost its relevance. France had become an occupying force, killing several birds with one stone. Napoleon's targeting of Egypt was not solely aimed at striking Britain. He was also looking to escape rising political pressures in France and redirect the public's attention elsewhere. If the campaign succeeded, he would return not only as a hero, but also significantly strengthened in his personal path toward power. Thus, in the spring of 1798, the French army set sail across the Mediterranean. More than 400 ships, over 30,000 soldiers, and hundreds of scholars, engineers, artists, and historians were on board. This was more than a military campaign. It was also a cultural and scientific expedition. All eyes were on Egypt, but the real target was far greater: to block the road to the heart of Britain. The expedition begins, an army fueled by science. Throughout history, countless armies have marched, some for victory, some for conquest, and others for revenge. However, in 1798, the army that set sail from France into the Mediterranean was equipped not only with gunpowder, swords, and cannons, but also with knowledge, curiosity, and a passion for discovery. The leader of this expedition was Napoleon Bonaparte. Yet this was not merely a military campaign, it was a civilizational mission, a march of enlightenment. Therefore, aboard the decks of the French fleet were not only soldiers, but also scientists, engineers, painters, linguists, and historians. For the first time in history, an invading army set out with science as its companion. A new understanding of expedition. In Napoleon's mind, battlefields were as important as fields of ideas. He sought not only to conquer land, but to spread knowledge, to uncover the ancient heritage of the East, and to rebuild Western civilization on Egyptian soil. With this vision, he included 167 scientists, artists, and intellectuals in the expedition. Among them were physicists, chemists, botanists, architects, engineers, and natural historians. This group would later come together under the name l'Institut d'Égypte, a foundation that would lay the groundwork for modern Egyptology. Cultural and scientific conquest. Napoleon did not want to conquer Egypt solely by military means. He aimed to take it culturally as well. Therefore, the scientists accompanying him began to systematically examine every corner of Egypt. Ancient structures, inscriptions, plant life, animal species, local customs, and climatic conditions were all carefully documented. This effort would culminate 20 years later in the publication of the monumental work Description de l'Égypte, Description of Egypt. Comprising 12 volumes, this encyclopedia became an invaluable source not only for the history of science, but also for world cultural history, the power of science. Amidst war during the campaign, the French army engaged in various conflicts, especially with the Mamluks, and later with British and Ottoman forces, making the expedition difficult. Yet even amid this chaos, the scientists continued their work. Measurements were taken at the pyramids, the flooding patterns of the Nile River were studied, and ancient inscriptions were copied. Each new discovery was a piece of knowledge not only for France, but for all humanity. Under Napoleon's command, an institute was established in Cairo that functioned much like an academy. Astronomy observations were conducted there. Engineering experiments were carried out. New weapon designs were tested, and reports on Egyptian social structures were prepared. Thus, this expedition was waged not only with swords, but also with pens. Legacy and contradiction. However, this army fueled by science was also an occupying force. For the Egyptians, this army was a foreign power disrupting their traditions, seizing their lands, and ruling over them. Napoleon's Enlightenment ideals and scientific ambitions were often perceived by the locals as oppression and exploitation. This reveals the expedition's inherent contradictions. Enlightenment and occupation, knowledge and power, curiosity and domination were all intertwined. Lasting impacts. Although the military aspect of the expedition ultimately ended in failure, its scientific and cultural impact was lasting. The work of the French scholars laid the foundation for the discipline of Egyptology. Interest in Egypt rapidly increased throughout Europe. The pyramids, hieroglyphs, pharaohs, and ancient gods deeply influenced Western imagination. After this expedition, the East was no longer seen merely as a territory to conquer, but also as a domain of knowledge. 1798 Egyptian expedition stands as a unique historical example. Science and war set sail together on the same ship, aiming to conquer both land and intellect. Napoleon's vision left a legacy still debated today, the fine line between the claim of bringing civilization and the reality of occupation. And walking that line was an army fueled by science. 24 hours in the shadow of the pyramids. Napoleon's historic journey. During the 1798 Egyptian campaign, the 24 hours Napoleon Bonaparte spent at the Giza pyramids was not merely a military pause. It was an unforgettable and meaningful experience at the heart of one of humanity's greatest mysteries. In that time, Napoleon acted not only as a general, but also as a thinker, diving into the depths of history, a curious explorer, uncovering the secrets of ancient civilizations, and a visionary guiding his future. The first encounter, facing the majesty of the pyramids. When Napoleon and his entourage arrived in the shadow of the pyramids, the massive stone structures seemed to have frozen time itself. The sunlit outer surfaces of the pyramids symbolized one of the greatest architectural achievements in human history. Yet Napoleon's interest did not stop there. He proceeded inward into labyrinthine corridors and mysterious chambers. This moment was not just a physical journey for him, but a spiritual connection with the past. journey beyond time, inside the pyramids. As he walked through narrow, dim corridors, Napoleon felt the weight of silence and mystery embedded within the pyramids. The hieroglyphs, symbols, and stone carvings dating back thousands of years were silent storytellers of history in his eyes. Alongside the scientists, historians, and linguists he brought, he studied these inscriptions and stepped into the knowledge world of the ancient Egyptian civilization. This was less the conquest of land by an invader, and more a respectful and admiring touch to the roots of a civilization. Guided by science and curiosity, Napoleon acted not only as a military commander, but also as an enlightened leader during this extraordinary campaign. Measurements taken within the pyramids, the recording of inscriptions, and the study of ancient structures were concrete examples of the army's scientific approach. Every detail, from the flooding patterns of the Nile River to the engineering marvels of the pyramids, was examined with great care. This scientific effort would later culminate in the monumental work, Description de l'Égypte, laying the foundations of modern Egyptology. An inner journey in a sacred place. The 24 hours spent inside the pyramids sparked a profound transformation in Napoleon's mind. Witnessing the grandeur of history and human perseverance led him to redefine his own path as a leader. By listening to the silence in these sacred spaces and tracing the marks of the past, he found not only the mindset of a military strategist, but also deep inner peace and resolve as a human being. Honoring humanity's shared heritage among millennia-old stones gave even greater meaning to his campaign. Vision and inspiration for the future. The time Napoleon spent at the pyramids also shaped his vision for the future. Being within one of the most magnificent structures in human history inspired him to leave similarly grand and lasting legacies in his own era. These moments marked the beginning of a mission far beyond military victory, a mission to spread civilization and knowledge, a meaning full of contradictions. On the other hand, this 24-hour experience also revealed the contradictions Napoleon carried as a representative of an occupying army. On one side was the desire to spread science and culture rooted in Enlightenment ideals. On the other was the harsh reality of oppression and control brought by an invading force. This complex duality contributed to a layered legacy of the campaign, both historically and for humanity. Shaken Dream, the Battle of Abu Qir, and the Syrian campaign. Napoleon's Egyptian campaign, which began in 1798, started with a grand dream to extend France's power to the east, cut off England's route to India, and establish a new dominance over the Mediterranean and the Middle East. However, this dream was soon shaken by harsh realities. The heavy defeat at the Battle of Abu Qir Bay and the subsequent Syrian campaign caused Napoleon's dream in the east to crumble. These two battles and campaigns were not only military failures, but also carried significant strategic and political lessons. Abu Qir Bay, hopes sunk at sea. During Napoleon's landing in Egypt, the French army faced the British Navy in the Mediterranean. Under the command of British Admiral Horatio Nelson, the British fleet dealt a crushing blow to the French Navy at Abu Qir Bay on August 1st, 1798. This battle became a turning point in Napoleon's Eastern campaign. The Battle of the Nile was not just a naval clash. It was a disaster that threatened France's strategic presence in the East. The British naval supremacy prevented the French from establishing a secure communication and supply line between Egypt and their homeland. This situation complicated Napoleon's campaign logistically and deeply affected the morale of his troops. Furthermore, the British victory strengthened England's power in the region in the eyes of the Ottoman Empire and other European powers. Syrian campaign, challenges on land. In 1799, Napoleon advanced into Syria to strengthen his position in Egypt and reduce the influence of the British and their Ottoman allies in the region. However, the Syrian campaign was far from easy. Long marches, harsh climate conditions, local resistance, and the resilience of Ottoman forces wore down the French army. The siege of Acre was the most critical and failed part of the campaign. The French were unable to overcome the strong resistance of the Ottoman garrison, supported by the British Navy. During the siege, outbreaks of disease, starvation, and logistical difficulties further weakened the army's endurance. This failure hastened Napoleon's decision to withdraw from Egypt and damaged his image in the East. Lessons behind the shaken dream. The events at Abu Qir and in Syria were fundamental reasons for the disappointment of Napoleon's Eastern campaign. These battles demonstrated the importance not only of military tactics, but also of strategic planning, logistics, and understanding regional conditions. Napoleon's direct military genius was evident even under these difficult circumstances, but the geography and political balances of the East drew clear limits around the French dream. British naval power and the Ottoman presence in the region were two major obstacles that shattered Napoleon's Eastern aspirations. The breaking of a dream and a new beginning. The failures at Abu Qir and in Syria halted Napoleon's rise in the East, but did not shake his place on the stage of history. These experiences shaped his later strategies and campaigns in Europe. The turbulent journey of the Egyptian campaign stands not only as a military operation, but also as a symbol of imperial ambitions, political calculations, and the testing of human determination. In conclusion, the shaken dream of the Abu Qir and Syrian campaigns is a tragic yet instructive story of Napoleon pushing his limits, fighting courageously, and leaving important lessons in human history. The triumph of science, the Rosetta Stone and its lasting legacy. History has repeatedly shown that victories are won not only on the battlefield, but also in the realms of knowledge and science. During Napoleon's Egyptian campaign in 1798, the discovery of the Rosetta Stone, one of the most important archaeological finds in human history, became one of the most striking proofs of this truth. This stone not only unlocked the secrets of ancient Egyptian civilization, but also represented the triumph of the scientific method, interdisciplinary collaboration, and respect for humanity's shared heritage. The discovery and decipherment of the Rosetta Stone flung open the doors of history and left a lasting legacy that continues to this day. The discovery of the Rosetta Stone. Coincidence or destiny? In 1799, French soldiers found a fragment of stone in the town of Rosetta, Rashid, in the Nile Delta. Inscribed on this stone was the same text in 3 different scripts: hieroglyphic, Demotic, and Greek, which at first glance appeared to be just another monument. However, scholars quickly realized that these inscriptions might hold a unique key to understanding the language and culture of ancient Egypt. This discovery marked a scientific turning point beyond the military campaign. The 3 scripts on the stone formed a complex puzzle that required the cooperation of experts from different disciplines to solve. While hieroglyphs had remained an unsolved mystery for centuries, understanding the Greek text provided invaluable guidance to scientists working to decipher the message. Scientific studies and the genius of Jean-François Champollion. Decoding the Rosetta Stone was the result of many years of interdisciplinary effort. The ongoing rivalry and collaboration between French and British scholars played a crucial role in the stone's interpretation. Finally, in 1822, the young French linguist Jean-François Champollion succeeded in discovering the fundamental principles of hieroglyphics and unlocking the ancient Egyptian script. Champollion's work revolutionized not only linguistics, but also fields such as history, archaeology, and anthropology. Thanks to his method, the history, culture, and religious beliefs of the Egyptian civilization, forgotten for thousands of years, came back to light. This discovery deepened humanity's understanding of its past and replaced many ancient myths with historical facts. The cultural and scientific legacy of the Rosetta Stone. The Rosetta Stone did more than reveal the secrets of ancient Egypt. It became a symbol of the process of decoding and understanding in the scientific world. It highlighted the interdisciplinary nature of scientific research and emphasized the importance of patience, curiosity, and meticulousness. The stone became a symbol of respect for humanity's shared heritage and the universal quest for knowledge. Moreover, the Rosetta Stone inspired the birth of modern archaeology and linguistics. Egyptology as a scientific discipline was founded on this discovery, accelerating studies of the languages and cultures of other ancient civilizations. Today, the Rosetta Stone continues to inspire scientists, historians, and enthusiasts worldwide. The Rosetta Stone today and its ongoing impact. Currently housed in the British Museum in London, the Rosetta Stone attracts millions of visitors each year. It is more than just a museum artifact. It stands as a living symbol of cultural identity, history, and scientific heritage. Additionally, the name Rosetta Stone has become synonymous across many fields with gaining access to complex knowledge and making sense of complicated information. With the advancement of technology and scientific methods, the process initiated by the discovery of the Rosetta Stone continues to demonstrate humanity's ongoing effort to understand its past. Genetic research, digital archaeology, and AI-supported analyses are uncovering previously unknown aspects of history, bringing the richness of human heritage into the light. The triumph of science. The Rosetta Stone and its lasting legacy is a unique example of how human curiosity, patience, and collaboration can produce powerful results. A single piece of stone illuminated the darkest chapters of history, revived a forgotten language of a civilization, and revolutionized the scientific world. This victory belongs not only to ancient Egypt, but to all humanity's shared heritage. The Rosetta Stone remains a monument that forever reminds us of the boundless power and lasting impact of knowledge. Napoleon returns. The legend remains. Napoleon Bonaparte's 1798 Egyptian campaign began on the grand stage of history with ambitious claims, but the anticipated victories and lasting dominions never materialized. However, this campaign is remembered not only for its military outcomes, but also for the cultural, scientific, and historical legacy it left behind. Napoleon left Egypt, yet the impact he made became legendary, living on for centuries. His campaign became a symbol of personal transformation and the marks left on history. Therefore, it can be said that Napoleon returns, but his legend remains. Napoleon's return from Egypt, military setbacks, and personal strategy. Napoleon realized that, following the failures of the Syrian campaign and the English Navy's dominance at sea, maintaining his position in Egypt was becoming increasingly difficult. In 1799, he abruptly and secretly departed Egypt and returned to France. This sudden return dealt a blow to the morale of his army and the continuation of the campaign. Yet, Napoleon's decision was not merely a military retreat, but also a political and strategic move. The political turmoil and the war environment in France made his return necessary. Upon his return, Napoleon quickly gained power in France and eventually declared himself emperor. The failures in Egypt did not end his career. On the contrary, with his tactical brilliance on the battlefield and political acumen, he embarked on new campaigns that would change the fate of Europe. This return marked one of the most critical turning points in his life, the birth of a legend. the historical and cultural reflections of the Egyptian campaign. Although Napoleon's campaign did not yield the expected military results, it created a profound impact in the fields of science and culture. Thanks to the scientists and researchers he brought with him, Egypt's history, geography, language, and culture were studied systematically for the first time. The comprehensive work, Description de l'Égypte, introduced the scientific and cultural richness of this campaign to the world. The discovery and decipherment of the Rosetta Stone stand as one of the most significant symbols of this process. This stone made the millennia-old Egyptian hieroglyphs readable, allowing ancient civilizations to be rediscovered. This scientific achievement became the true and lasting legacy of Napoleon's campaign. Egyptology as a discipline was born from this campaign and has since made significant contributions to world cultural history. The fine line between legend and reality. Napoleon's story is woven with both victories and defeats. The Egyptian campaign was both a turning point and a trial in his career. The contradictions it contained: military power alongside scientific progress, invasion alongside enlightenment, personal ambition alongside respect for cultural heritage, made the Napoleon legend even more complex and compelling. His presence in Egypt, with the harsh realities of occupation, combined with important steps taken for the spread of knowledge and culture, resembles a mosaic. For this reason, Napoleon is remembered not only as a soldier or political leader, but also as a historical figure, a legend. Its reflection today, and an endless source of inspiration. Napoleon's return from Egypt and the legend that followed continue to be studied and interpreted by historians, writers, artists, and politicians today. His leadership style, strategic intelligence, and vision remain a source of inspiration in many fields. At the same time, the scientific dimension of the Egyptian campaign highlights the importance of modern research methods and interdisciplinary collaboration. Napoleon's campaign is not just a military story. It is a journey into the richness of human history. Conclusion: Napoleon returned, but the mark he left, the legend he created, remained as one of the significant chapters in human history. His Egyptian campaign was, as much as the dreams of an emperor, a victory for science, culture, and history. This campaign proved that victory is not won only on battlefields. Knowledge, curiosity, and discovery are as powerful as the sword. Napoleon returns, but his legend lives on forever.